One of the least explained concepts in Xenoblade 2 is what exactly the parameters are for a driver awakening a blade. While the cutscene titled Gormott hasn't changed a bit, tells us that you have to have the aptitude for it, to my knowledge, the game never actually tells us what attributes, traits, or even skills determine that aptitude. And for a game that's pretty much centered around the bond between the driver and blade, I always found that interesting. Because if the ability to awaken a blade is as simple as being a good fighter or being able to form a bond with others, why are there drivers who can't fight like Nile, or drivers who obviously don't care about their blades like Dougal? There doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to the process of driver selection. Unless the blades have more to do with this process than we've been led to believe. And while I'm aware the driver selection process is probably meant to be left up to interpretation, or maybe meant to be more of a "it's the friends we made along the way" kind of thing, I don't care. I'm gonna need a little bit more than that. So we know that Klaus mentions at the end of the game that he created blades as a safeguard for humanity to ensure they wouldn't make the same mistakes as the humans of his world did. And we know based on the conversation Rex had with Jin right before the party meets Klaus, that this is done by blades passing on information when humans die in order to stop the inevitable destruction that humans bring. In other words, they don't just exist to give people a bodyguard, despite what some may think. They have a very specific purpose that revolves around collecting data that is used not only to further evolve the blade, but also to be relayed to the members of the Trinity processor so that Klaus can monitor how humanity is behaving and evolving. And I believe that it's this data that forms the basis for who can and can't resonate with a core crystal. Consider the heart-to-heart titled Daybreak, where Cosmos talks about how the world tree was built. She mentions that the data that she has on the world tree exists independently from her ordinary memories and that she doesn't know how it got there. She also mentions that even when she returns to her core crystal, that information doesn't seem to be lost. And because I'm not sure if her knowing this information is some Easter egg or reference to Xenosaga since I still haven't played it, there are more instances of this kind of thing occurring. For example, the heart-to-heart titled Reunion shows Vess talking about how she has a feel for a place that she knows in her heart or in her subconscious, but has no immediate memory of. And when you consider Amalthus's cleansing procedure with these instances in mind, things start to come together. Because it's pretty obvious that this procedure isn't just wiping a blade's immediate memories. That happens naturally when they go back into their core. Instead, he is completely erasing all data from the core crystals. And if you remember, he claims that this procedure makes it easier for drivers to resonate with them. They're essentially given a blank slate. The question is, why does that make them easier for drivers to resonate with? Well, I think it's because each time someone awakens a blade, in theory, it becomes harder and harder to reawaken that same blade because its list of requirements for reawakening grow larger. And this is because it needs new data from its driver. Therefore, the pool of potential drivers that are able to resonate with that blade shrink each time it's awoken. Think of it like factory resetting a computer. Each time it resets, it erases pretty much everything except its basic protocols needed to function. Keep that analogy in mind because we'll circle back to it in a bit. Of course, we know that Amalthus was really draining the core crystals of their power to prevent them from becoming titans and to attempt immortality. However, Indul's control of the crystals and their distribution may explain why Dromark talks about the pool of potentials shrinking when referring to why the Ardanian Empire is recruiting drivers from outside the military. Even though the Praetor is giving the crystals a better chance of being resonated with, he's still restricting the amount of crystals in circulation. Plus, Jin and Malos were kind of hoarding a bunch. It's also possible that because Klaus kind of stopped caring about the world before he was fully able to observe Rex and Pyra's bond, his willpower, so to speak, inadvertently stopped the crystals from needing to collect as much data since it was essentially pointless before Rex and Pyra. Perhaps both this and the Praetor restricting the crystals caused the pool of potentials to shrink. Of course, you could also look at that phrase from Dromark about the pool of potential shrinking as an argument against this entire theory, seeing as even with the restriction of the distribution of blades, there should be at least an equal amount of potentials, if not more, with the sheer number of cleansed blades available. The problem is, it's not really clear to what extent this restriction is being put on the blade distribution unless I'm forgetting a scene where it's better explained. The pool of potential drivers shrinking could of course also refer to humanity becoming more degenerate, seeing as the next portion of the cutscene shows a blade rejecting someone that is pretty obviously rude and arrogant. However, that doesn't explain why so many bandits and even straight up evil people are able to become drivers. Plus, this scene could simply be showing us that there's more to being a driver than just being big and tough. Perhaps that blade had had enough previous drivers that were just like him and didn't require any more data on that type of person, because it's possible the data needed from individuals is based on what data the members of the Trinity processor already have. And this idea of blades requiring information to resonate is further backed up by the Japanese word used for aptitude in this scene, tekisei, which can also be translated as suitability or fitness. Gramps actually uses this word to try to better define who can and can't resonate with a blade when Rex inquires about it. It's not so much about needing a qualification to become a driver, but about being suitable. Perhaps one must be suitable to open a core crystal only by meeting that blade's requirements. And I think that's essentially why Pyra selected Rex even though he wasn't a driver. I mean, he had never even tried to resonate with a core crystal as far as we know, yet Pyra chose him. Of course, the Aegises don't really play by the same rules as other blades, so we can't go off of her actions too much, but she and Malos do provide the framework for all blades, so we know that what they do is at least not out of the realm of possibility for other blades. Based on her conversation with the Praetor about her choice to resonate with Rex later on in Chapter 5, she must have known consciously or subconsciously that Rex has the information she needs to save Alrest. Selflessness, compassion, courage, etc. Essentially, the core crystal is searching for ways to not only further evolve, but it's also searching to find a purpose for the reason humanity exists. Rex and Pyra's bond was that answer. Klaus even refers to Rex and Pyra as the other answer in a cutscene toward the end of the game. Of course, I'm not suggesting that regular blades in their core crystal form can consciously choose a driver, but in a way, they do subconsciously choose. Remember, core crystals were once conceived as a replacement for human brain cells, so in a way, they're like AI, which means that they act as a computer would. The blade that is born from the core crystal may not actively display knowledge of having an influence on the selection of their driver based on what we may call their RAM or random access memory, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a part of them that selected or rejected a driver based on existing data stored in what we may call their hard drive, if you want an ultra simplified analogy. I'm sure someone more tech savvy than myself could provide a better analogy, so feel free to in the comments, but I think you get my point. So am I saying that most Nopons such as Tora have nothing to contribute to the gathering of data by the blades? Well, I think that's one shortcoming to this theory, but Nopon are also very mysterious creatures and kind of play by their own rules like the Aegises do. You don't have to look too far to find those in the Xenoblade community who will theorize about Nopon basically being on their own plane of existence, so yeah, I guess Nopon's information is kind of irrelevant to the mere mortals of Alrest. But I realize there are shortcomings to this theory, like why Morag would be able to awaken a blade that has likely gotten enough information on her family already, or the fact that Pyra, being the Master Blade, doesn't know that blades simply require information to resonate with a driver, as seen in the next cutscene. Either way, I don't think it's as simple as just blades needing information, or just a driver having what it takes to be a blade. Rather, I think it's a bit of both. A blade like Brigid may not need information from drivers in the same family group, but perhaps Morag is an exception to the rule, simply because she's related to someone else who possessed the information needed to awake Brigid. Maybe that's why Nile is a driver too, despite his inability to fight. Maybe Pyra is just unaware of what is needed to awaken a blade, just like all the other blades, because it's not really something that anyone needs to know. Regardless of what I think though, it's clear that there's more than meets the eye when it comes to blade and driver resonance. Just like someone else we know. Greetings from the guy that said I'm really hoping to speed up the process of these episodes and then took like 4 months to post one. Yep, that was super cool. Seriously though, I apologize for saying that and not delivering. I'm gonna try my best not to do that again. On another note, I know I kinda skipped a cutscene and glossed over parts of the 2 that I covered in this episode, but that doesn't necessarily mean I won't ever pull from them again in a future episode. Anyway, let me know if you disagree with anything, and as always, thanks for watching till the end.